Thanks for attending today. And we wanted to give you a bit of an idea. I'm pretty sure almost everybody here has heard something about this Science Gateways Community Institute through Nancy Wilkins-Deere or Marlin or one of your colleagues. And today we really want to focus on talking about an event that the Incubator puts on called the Bootcamp. I'll talk just briefly about the Incubator, and many of you may have heard part of that story already. I don't think too many have heard the story of what we do in the Bootcamp, though, and so we really want to focus the most of what we talk about today on that. I'm Mike Zentner. I'm the lead of the Incubator program in the Science Gateway Community Institute, and I'm the director of HUBzero at Purdue University. And I'm joined today by Nancy Maron, who's also instrumental in developing and delivering the Bootcamp. And maybe, Nancy, you want to say a couple words about yourself, and then we'll march in.
Sure. Well, I first got to meet Mike when I was at Ithaca SNR, where I was for about 8 years. When I was there, I studied a bunch of different models and methods for sustaining digital projects. And one of the things I did, and the way we came in touch with each other, was that Ithaca had developed a course on thinking about sustainability. So some of the ideas that we developed then have found their way into this new iteration. Now I run my own consulting shop, BlueSky to Blueprint, but I'm still very much involved in this. So really enjoying the fantastic team that Mike has put together for this workshop.
Okay, so briefly, what the Incubator is really focused on short-term consulting to help people in gateway or digital presence sort of activities. And we don't tend to focus so much on the technology portion of things, although we do have some technology planning notions that we help with, and certainly Randy participates from a cybersecurity standpoint. And so there is some aspect of tech selection around it, but it's usually more focused on the business considerations that selecting technology or developing technology, the impact those considerations have on how you operate. And oftentimes people don't realize when they're getting into a gateway that this isn't just doing core research anymore, but they actually are inheriting, whether they like it or not, some of the aspects of dealing with essentially a small business, even though it may not be a commercial business, but many of the same principles apply. So you see things here like project management, sustainability, planning, strategic planning, and then there's a few other aspects of what the Incubator does that were results of the large-scale survey that the Institute took during its formative stage. And in particular, two of those services that people really wanted were short-term graphic design help and usability consultations. And so we've included those in Incubator services as well. But typically we don't anticipate an engagement lasting more than, say, about a month to solve or help consult on a very specific problem. And then, people may come back and have other sort of problems that they also want to address. And just because you engage with the Incubator once doesn't mean that you can't engage again. So there really is no notion of absolutely graduating and being inappropriate for it anymore. The highlights of the Incubator that I wanted to talk about today are really the boot camps. So we've had one boot camp, and we're going to talk quite a bit about what we learned during that boot camp and what the contents of that boot camp were. This occurred in April of this year in Indianapolis. We had a really great group of attendees. We're having a second one in October of this year, also in Indianapolis. And we're basically accepting up to 10 projects to participate in this as a cohort, and I'll say more about that sort of coming forward as well. But no more than 10 projects, because we try to foster a very interactive environment and not a week-long lecture. So this is sort of the rationale behind that. For folks that want to learn more about this, you can go to the sciencegateways.org website today and look in more detail about our upcoming event on the bootcamp. And there's even a PDF that you can download in there that'll give you a little bit more detail about that. And when you go to the website, I think it will still say that the application deadline is today. But since we're just talking to you today and you may not have heard about this, we'll extend that until next Friday and give you a chance, if you're interested, to look at your schedules and see whether that fits with you. If you can't make it this time and you do see something you're interested in, we will, of course, again, offer it in the next year, either in the spring or the summer. We're still trying to decide on that. And then, as I also mentioned, we engage in consultation for specific requests for help. And we've got a few of those going on right now, mostly graduates from the boot camp, but it's not necessarily a prerequisite that you go to the boot camp to engage in a consulting activity, but I think it helps in helping you understand where you might need the most help. So, the overall notion of the boot camp is around sustainability, and that's from many different facets of thinking about sustainability. And Nancy, maybe you want to say just a couple more words about how you define sustainability in this perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And it's one of those terms where I'm sure everyone on this call would agree. People tend to project their own thoughts and fears and hopes onto this word from whatever kind of stance and position that they're in. So it's worth unpacking a little so you see how our coaching team is looking at it. Some people, for example, think of sustainability and they immediately think of technological questions. Others think specifically around preservation, and others think maybe just about business questions. And what we've tried to do with this program is bring all that together. In my mind anyway, the way I've been thinking about it is we're kind of good with whatever plan works for you, so long as at the end of the day, what you've managed to do is come up with a plausible way to keep getting what you need to keep doing what you're doing. And in a little more detail, what that means is, in some cases, it's financial support, like literally funds for paying for things. In some cases, it's in-kind contributions, whether it's from partners or from an institution. And in other cases, it just could be cold hard cash that gets generated through income generation and interesting other strategies. So there's all kinds of ways. Oh, and also just straight up volunteer time, which is a very, very big resource that a lot of these projects use. So we always encourage people to think about this, not just in terms of how can I get it once, which is the situation if you get a grant, really. You have it, it's guaranteed for the time it's guaranteed for, and then it's not guaranteed until you've gotten the next one. In this case, we encourage people to think about things as a cycle. What do we need to keep building so that we can encourage a cycle of developing value and then getting people to support us because they feel it's too critical not to. So anyway, so that's the idea. So what you'll see inside of that, I'll go into a bit later, but we like the idea of pulling into everything. There's going to be a bit of business strategy. We'll talk about and have people talking about technology issues, have people talking about business strategy issues and financial management issues and project management, all those things. Hope that helps, Mike.
Yeah. To sort of make some of that more concrete, this is kind of an at a glance view of the boot camp, and it really focuses on helping you at the top here describe your idea in terms that common people can understand, identifying who benefits from it and what value they specifically get out of it. Where does it fit in the overall landscape of things that might compete with it, which aren't necessarily direct competitors, but can be your users doing other things that are substitutes, right? So we, in the Gateway community, we have people doing all kinds of things sometimes to avoid getting away from their desktop. To some of the concrete steps you can take to make it happen. And here's where, for example, the usability comes in and the technology planning and security and all that. And ultimately, at the end, how do you go about selling it to people? And so our focus here really isn't on disseminating a ton of knowledge to you, but instead packing you together for 5 full days. And it does sound like a lot, but trust me, it's actually worth it, in a way that, yes, there's some knowledge dissemination, but there's a great deal of interactivity between people. And our goal in doing this is to have you form a community with others who you might not have known beforehand, but you'll come to realize during that week you're all facing similar problems and you all can learn from each other. And we ideally want you to keep in touch with each other as time goes by and learn from other cohorts both before and after yours. There is homework during the week as well. So these are 5 pretty full packed days. But like I said, there's a lot of interactive time packed in there as well. And just to give you kind of a feeling for it, so we don't, for example, we don't have everybody really introduce themselves at first. In fact, we limit you to about a minute. You're not even allowed to talk about your project. And the very first exercise we have you go through is a much more interesting exercise in terms of developing a sketch on a napkin of what you have and what value you really think it provides to a customer or a user in a very commonly understandable way. And then we have everybody go around the room and talk about their drawings and have a detailed Q&A session with each group, you know, presenting and everybody else listening and asking. And that's where we really start to learn who everybody else is. And that same sort of notion is continued throughout the week. So the idea here is to take you away from the normal thing you do on a day-to-day basis, and to do that for more than a day or two, right? To do that for a week so that you can really focus on looking at things from a very different perspective. Sometimes people ask, well, who's appropriate for this? Is it core science? Is it infrastructure? Is it data analytics? Is it, you know, whatever? In our first boot camp, we had all of these different areas applying. And we accepted some of the applicants from each one of these areas. And again, you might think, well, maybe what am I going to learn from somebody in operations research? Well, the truth of the matter is we had somebody in ecology learn a lot from somebody in operations research from the standpoint of how to structure a foundation. And they may even be participating in each other's management boards. So these are things that, again, we really try to foster as we get into the week-long activity. You may also wonder, well, who are these people? Are they all techies? Are they faculty? What are they? This is an indication of the types of people that applied in the first boot camp. And certainly we did have faculty and we did have PhD students, but there were a lot of other different kinds of people too. We had senior management from some universities. We had staff researchers, like I think many of us probably are on the call. Even professional administrators who aren't necessarily in senior management roles, but are really those people that we all rely on at times to handle financials and to make our projects go. And every single one of these people indicated that they got value out of interacting with everybody else. And the key thing about it is everybody in the room really felt like a peer. There was no seniority. There was no fear after that first day, fear of speaking or asking questions or looking silly or anything. And it was a really rewarding experience to see all these different types and levels of professions and scientific disciplines get together and really learn from each other. Specifically speaking, some of the projects that we had, or the projects that we had here, are listed here. Some of the abbreviations may not mean a lot to you. You can also see we had a variety of institutions that participated, and not all of them were universities, but we had a couple of societies that participated in National Lab, and also we had some interesting involvement from the folks at Nectar in Australia that wanted to observe what we were doing and thinking about bringing it over to Australia. And we'll be doing the same thing in our spring offering with a group from Europe that's also interested in looking at what we're doing and possibly bringing it to Europe. We, again, as I said, we focus on creating an environment where we hope that we can create a community. The only way that something like this scales is that you as a group become a community that interacts in a way that it didn't interact before. And I've taken a few select reference quotes here from some of our attendees that try to stress the importance of that from a qualitative standpoint. You can see Steve Androulakis here from Nectar says that we cultivate a lively, active, hands-on environment and provide a great experience overall. Joe Yun from the University of Illinois said there wasn't a single person in the room that he did not learn something from, and he looks forward to keeping in touch. Chris Leonard from Renzi, very similar thing, looking forward to keeping in touch with his fellow participants on various elements of his project going forward. And so, I think we established the first part of that, the precursor to people wanting to form a community. Quantitatively, it's indicated by some of the surveys we took after the fact. You can see here 2 of the questions from that where we say, did you make social connections that would be beneficial to your work? And everybody agreed to some degree, most on the high end of that. And also we asked people how valuable they thought to the work of their gateway would it be to keep in touch with members of the cohort. And everybody said there was some degree of value to it, some more than others. But again, we take this as a very positive sign that people in this community want to form a larger community of people doing things, even if they're not in the same disciplines. Content-wise, what you see here is sort of a before and after assessment of people's confidence on various aspects of running a gateway. I'm not going to read for you all these different aspects on the side, but they cover things like, do you know what you need to do from a cybersecurity standpoint? Do you know what you need to do to identify your key audience segments? What do you need to do to make it sustainable, and so on. So there were a lot of different topics that we were trying to assess here. And I think what's most notable about this is the increase in confidence people had before and after the event. So that's what you see with the 2 bar charts here, where we definitely have a shift toward the higher end of somewhat and very confident versus how people came into the event. So we think we had a pretty positive impact on people, and we're doing several months later follow-ups with some of those folks now to see how well some of the things we did stuck. It's like anything else. If you learn something and don't go away and practice it, it tends to fall away over time. So we want to make sure that we do things to help that happen. We have I think a great team of instructors. You probably recognize some of the pictures here. Suresh Maru from IU, Randy Hyland from IU, Nancy is here. I'm at the far end in the upper corner. Juliana Casavan works here at Purdue as a senior instructor in a thing called the Purdue Foundry, which is the program that faculty and staff at Purdue go through when they're thinking about commercializing an idea. Sandra Gessing, I'm sure several of you are aware of who Sandra is, and she talks about on-campus support groups and how to develop them. Paul Parsons on the lower side here is a usability faculty at Purdue, and we'll talk about UX, and that happens to be one of our most popular units actually. And people do a UX assessment right there in the classroom, and it's kind of fun. And Naidi Molinex, who's on the call here today, is sort of the outreach and marketing person for the Institute, and imparts a lot of great advice on things you can do at very low cost to promote your own gateway efforts. So Nancy took some time here to put together a summary of what we do in the curriculum, and I'll have her talk through some of these ideas and what we actually expect you to get out of it. And then I've got a few pictures to show afterwards of what it actually looked like when people were doing it. So take it away, Nancy.
Thanks, Mike. Well, this is a pretty, this slide is a pretty straight up list, but you know, it says what's in the tin. I mean, these are a lot of the things we're going to be covering, but I'll just give you an overview of kind of the flavor behind, you know, behind each of these things. So you get a sense, not just of what these subjects are, but what you're likely to come out of this whole experience with. So as Mike mentioned, when you start off, I mean, teams are just getting to know each other. People haven't heard of these necessarily everyone else's projects. They might think they know. We start with a very kind of open-ended, literally sketching out what it is you think you're doing. And even though it sounds so obvious, do a sketch about what your project is, how, you know, how it works, what value it offers. This can even then be a real revelation to people and how tricky it can be to express it to somebody else. So we start with just getting people comfortable talking about what it is they do and why it's important. And from that, we actually start bringing people through a series of exercises that are aimed at, it's the kind of research and thinking you would do if you work really with a business consultant on analyzing what the strengths of your project are, which things that you think are great about your project are your personal assumptions as opposed to, let's just say, reality, and giving you ways that you can test it and refine it. So in some way, I'm not going to go too far down this path, Randy, don't worry, but I would go so far as to say that we take kind of an iterative approach, you know, things that have probably some close relationship to even development techniques, where we know you're not going to come out of this on day one with a perfect business plan or a perfect strategy. We want you to iterate. So we get you to express some ideas. We try testing them. We prod at the things that seem solid, to make sure they really are. And if they're not, we help you figure out ways to strengthen them and to build them up. So we talk a little bit about the value proposition. We have an exercise to get you to try to really zero in and pinpoint, not just why you like something, but why you think the people you're building really like it. We unpack with you what it means to have an audience. Who is actually using the thing you've developed? Are you sure those are the people using it? Could there be other people using it? Who else gets value from it besides the people who interact directly? Who are all those indirect people? I don't know, like your funder, like your host institution. So we do a project where we have you analyze in a little more depth, not just who that core is, but who those concentric circles out are likely to be. What do we know about them? What do we still need to find out? So that's another nice piece of work. As Mike mentioned, we'll even have you look broader afield than that. Folks mostly like to think that they've built something because nothing like it ever existed before. And we will challenge you to think that the thing you've made may not be as unique or, you know, as unique as you would hope it might be. So we do a piece where we encourage you to look around and see what actual other types of competition might be that could be a challenge to your executing the thing you'd like to. Then once you've looked at that kind of big environment, the external forces that might help you think about how to shape up the value and the thing that you're really trying to deliver, there's a bunch of nitty-gritty work as well that involves what will it cost and how will I find funding sources for it. So there's a whole stream of that goes very logically from big thinking ideas down to testing, down to how would I execute. In addition to that, there's a stream of fantastic other units, and we have Randy on the line. If there are questions for him, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them. But there are two different units that tackle various aspects of how technology itself is a critical part, and how tackling questions from risk to execution and development strategies plays a very big role in your overall sustainability. Mike mentioned the user experience piece. And the campus-based cooperative strategies, and then also Nighty's piece on marketing and promotion, where at the end of the day, even if you've come up with a wonderful plan and an initiative that seems to work, if we haven't done a good job getting the word out to your potential users and audience, it could be as if it never existed at all. So it's a whole suite of activities, from really driving it, defining that value, getting other information that may help you make it even stronger than it already is, to how you'll express that out to the world and find other sources that can support you. So we start off with this, oh my goodness, you know, people get a little bit nervous, like, wow, I had trouble even really saying what it was I was working on. And that's day one. Once we've made it all through the 5 days, the final piece on the other end, the bookend, if you will, is a final presentation where people have actually done all of this fine-tuning and tweaking and are able to make a statement about, here's the value, here's my new working hypothesis about my audience, here's my new working hypothesis about what those funding options are going to be, and here's why I think it's going to work. So it comes up, it becomes a very nice path from a ton of questions to at least a path forward, a hypothesis and a path forward to making sure that that the new plan can work, and if not, figuring out how to change it. So I hope that helps a little bit. We like to bring people all the way through from the beginning through to something that's clear and actionable, something they can take away with them.
And this is you too, Nancy, so if you want to continue the thought.
Yeah, I mean, this is just my way of remembering to share with you that our thinking, and this is true of all the instructors, is that we really want to push the teams that come to not stay with original assumptions. Now, the assumptions may prove out and be entirely factual, and which is great. But one of the most exciting parts of the session, in my opinion, was watching teams ask constructive questions of other teams, or offer ideas, or say, have you thought about this? And we had a very, very supportive setting, so that I think people were welcoming of that and really appreciated it. The brainstorm with instructors is great too, because in the room, you have people with a business background, you have people with a technology background, you have people with a marketing background. So there's a whole suite of skills that come to bear when we do facilitate your team thinking on this. And then, like I said, at the end, we all can see that even if it's a week, which is an awfully long time to expect of anybody, you will have come up with a lot of good ideas, hopefully. But you will also have an even longer list of things you still want to know. So if we've done our work well, you're leaving with some very good solid ideas as well as your own action plan. So that's the mode in which we will operate.
Okay, so just to give you an idea of what this looks like, I've got a few pictures of the session. This is what it looked like when we started, and you'll notice there's no technology on the table. We try to make it clear we don't want people to have technology open while we're working. There's plenty of interactive time to do that later. And we start out by setting the expectation that we're not here to teach you how to code. We're here to teach you to think about the implications of what you do coding-wise and other things. It is a business, even though you may not be starting one. It truly is thinking that way. Here's some view of the napkin drawing activity. You can see a couple of folks here working on their drawing on one side, and you can see the presentation aspect of it on the other side. And we always had a lot of questions from the group as they tried to learn who each other was and what it was they were doing. Here's some of the other activities. We try to structure some social events that are a little bit fun. You know, we don't serve Fazoli's lunch and things that you do during your day-to-day existence. We try to do other things. At dinner time, we have a lot of stand-up time before we sit down to have dinners. The food truck here, we had an emergency bailout of one of the lunch plans, and our coordinator coerced a taco guy to come and serve us custom, and that turned out to be a real nice lunch. But we, you know, again, this is around developing some social connections in addition to just sharing tech knowledge. Here's another exercise that comes up in the on-campus group, which essentially is a role-playing exercise where people are encouraged to get in disagreements with each other and ask each other for money and raise the typical objections they might get and how to get around them. So we try to have a different kind of exercise with each one of our units. This is a picture of the outcome of NIDE's discussion on marketing and having the group define marketing, and then all the way to the end where on the last day everybody gets up and gives, I think, a 5 to 7 minute presentation, which is composed of slides that cover each of the units that we've talked about that week. We call it a pitch deck rather than call it a hypothesis, because it's just a little, I don't know, rolls off the tongue a little easier to call it a pitch deck. But you know, the idea here is that you have a story that you can start to tell with that pitch deck that goes beyond your typical scientific interactions, that maybe you could even show management at a university and they wouldn't look at you cross-eyed and understand exactly, you know, what it is you're targeting. Nancy did mention that the boot camp is long. It's 5 days and they're packed days. We don't give you 2 hours off to go do whatever it is you want to do. We were a little bit worried about that, but we felt if we only did a 2-day activity that people really wouldn't form those connections. And that bore out at the end when we had sort of a debriefing. And you can see here that for the most part, most people thought that that length was just about right. A few thought it was too long. I'm not sure who thought it was too short, but they must be gluttons for punishment, because they were long days. And also at the end, would you recommend this to a colleague? And you know, we had a very high extremely likely and a lot of likelies in there. So we think it's we think people thought it was a rewarding activity. We did ask a few just really qualitative questions on our exit surveys. One was, did you have any magic moments that you wanted to point out? And you can see here the napkin drawing was highly valued by the first person here on the side. It was in the second case, people didn't really know where to go when they came in, and they felt like they had a plan when they left, or at least the structure to develop a plan. And in the third case here, as I mentioned, people were impressed by the fact that many of the same challenges are faced regardless of the life cycle of your project. Some were brand new and hadn't even started. Others had been in business for 10 plus years. Yet everybody saw there were commonalities in the issues that they had to address. Some of the miscellaneous stuff, people did comment that they like to see different kinds of food than they normally see. I like the one in the middle quite a lot. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it's probably what I needed. And I think that that says a lot. And then, of course, we did have a little bit of problem with some of our transportation that was normally used for farm equipment, and people didn't like the shock absorbers. And apparently there was one van that got lost in a slight panic mode one night, but otherwise it worked out well, and everybody survived at the end. This is the group on the final day. Nobody left early. We asked people not to leave early. Nobody did. And they're all still smiling. You see one person here holding a computer. That person, that's that person's partner in the project that had to attend virtually the entire time, all day, every day, because she had recently delivered a child. And you know, you see again the whole group. Some of the comments at the end, we did ask, how did you think about Indianapolis as a place to be? And I think the beforehand was, why would we want to go there? The second afterwards, one of the folks said, well, they were kind of glad it was Indianapolis because we kept them so busy. If it was somewhere nicer, they would have been resentful of having to spend all day in the room with us. So this was sort of the experience, and would like to open it up if anybody has questions or other things they'd like to talk about related to the boot camp or the incubator in general. We're happy to try to answer questions. But I will say also, as I stressed at the beginning, if you are interested and want to register, you can go to the sciencegateways.org website, read a little bit more detail, and we will leave it open until next Friday for since we just got around to presenting this today. And I know a week is a long time to think about. So if you need a little bit of time to think whether that kind of commitment is right for you, then feel free to take it.
Hi, Mike. This is Mona. I do have a question. Did you guys welcome people actually in the commercial world who might benefit from a class like this, a workshop?
We haven't had, we had an applicant that was sort of from the commercial world in the first one. I wouldn't necessarily have anything against it as a thing to try. Of course, you understand that just like your projects, the NSF asks the Institute about its long-term plan for sustainability. And one of the things we have talked about is whether or not in the commercial market, people would find value in some of the services we offer. We think that they would. And I think I would be all for piloting it with maybe a commercial entity or two in the room along with the academic groups to see how that goes, and whether, do our own customer discovery to see whether that actually is of financial value in the commercial world. So I don't see any problems with that, but at the same point in time, I don't want to cut off NSF or federally sponsored projects unnecessarily if we're targeting those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hi, this is Emery Brooks. Hi, Michael. Thank you for the presentation. You had one slide up that had a bunch of sort of points that were covered during it. I think one of them was usability studies. Could you bring that slide back up?
Sure. My belief is I can. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're getting there. There we go. This one?
Cover feature. Yeah, maybe it sort of looked like that. I thought I saw one that said usability studies. But anyway, it could be sort of user experience. So could you talk a little bit about what you can offer in terms of usability studies or user experience, work?
Yeah. There are two primary things we do. The first of these is taking an already existing web property and doing a usability assessment on it and providing recommendations. The second is more for greenfield sort of projects that haven't gotten started yet and are really trying to think about that UX perspective as they design their initial deployment. It's really two sort of different skill sets to do those two different kinds of activities, but those are sort of the two things that we've seen so far.
Okay, and this would happen, this would be covered during the boot camp, and we would be able to get sort of some usability assessment.
So we have a unit during the boot camp on usability and user experience. I believe it's 2 to 2.5 hours. I'm not sure exactly what. And what happens during that unit is we introduce some common things that you can do without any help to do some user assessment, right? So we take people through the technique of doing user assessment by having them work on a project that is introduced in the course as a case study, and have volunteers come up and try to perform some tasks on this website, and to some degree they're successful, and to other degrees we watch how they fail at what they're trying to do. And that introduces the concept of how to do a very simple test. And then we take the teams and pair them up with each other and have them assess each other's sites. So we'll have, for example, you may for Gen App say, I want to assess people's ability to go change the background color of their application, right? And that might be one of your goals. And then what we'll do is we'll have somebody who might be working on a project in, I don't know, classifying plants, come over and try to do that per your instructions and see where they get lost. And, this is a very quick introduction to how to go about doing a very simple usability study all on your own at no cost. And then the follow-up for that would be, if you want to apply specifically for usability services, we can have a more direct engagement with the applicant on specific things they want to learn. And this might take the form of, if it's assessing the usability of something that's existing already, for example, we might have a small team of usability, senior students in usability and grad students in usability do that work and provide back a report. If it's more of a design activity from scratch, then we probably would employ a slightly different set of students and supervised by faculty to do that work as well.
Okay, that sounds very useful. Thank you for that information.
Yeah, people love the user experience unit. You know, for the most part, they like pretty much everything they saw, but user experience really went over well. It's something that so many of us ignore. Maybe not deliberately, but we do end up ignoring it, and for many different reasons. And it was really something a lot of people appreciated doing. And of course, we had a great instructor who taught it last time. Paul's going to be new to the program, but I was told, I was referred to him by our previous instructor, and she said he'll be really good. So we're looking forward to it again.
Sounds great.
This is Mona. If I may just add, Emory, Paul actually gave a presentation to the SGCI EDS group on usability testing that I thought was really good. I'm pretty sure got recorded. So ask Marlon for that recording, and you'll see a nice sort of demonstration of basically doing the usability testing.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks, Mona.
Or you can email me, and I'll email Marlon, whichever one. You know Marlon's email address, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and Paul did that one. Paul gave that presentation.
Okay.
Other questions? All quiet. Okay, I'll take that as no additional questions.
I don't want to hog all the time, but I wouldn't mind asking also if you could elucidate a bit about the cybersecurity.
And we've got the man right here. So Randy, take it away.
Hi, Emory. This is Randy Highland. So, yeah, I think we've met briefly in the past, perhaps at Gateways conference last year, but I work in the CTSC group here at IU, and so the URL for us is trustedci.org. And just a few days ago, Nancy Wilkins-Deer asked for an updated text as to what it is we provide the Science Gateways community, and so I sent her a blurb, and it's going to appear on the Science Gateways site here any day now. But in the meantime, if you haven't visited our site, you know, we're at trustedci.org, and off to the left you'll see the various links about training materials and engagements that we do with NSF projects. And so what we try to bring to the table with the Science Gateways community is, you know, essentially doing software engineering with security in mind. And so that's probably everything that you can imagine, just as a foundation, just doing core software engineering, right? With source code repositories and, if necessary, two-factor authentication, sort of the usual gamut. But let me pause and just ask if you had specific questions about cybersecurity.
Yeah, I was curious for Gateway developers what was going to be contained in this boot camp and how much was going to be devoted to it. I think with our recommended new GenApp award, I think we're going to be working more closely with you. I think you were specific. The Cybersecurity Institute was specifically mentioned in the proposal. So
yeah, very good. Yeah, I failed to mention that we have been named as the NSF Cybersecurity Center of Excellence about a year and a half ago. So, as I said, we form these engagements with other NSF projects, and we go in and do, the scope can vary considerably, but we can go in and do a couple-week checkup of security issues, or we can do a more lengthy 6-month engagement with back and forths. And certainly for Gateways, you know, there's quite a breadth of information that's relevant. Certainly secure software engineering is one, but identity management is another biggie. Again, probably you've been tapped in with the NCSA folks as well, Jim Basney in particular. And again, I don't know what all you may have touched on in the past, but we would certainly be, you know, anxious to work with you in whatever way it makes sense, and drop me an email directly if that makes sense, or there's an application form on the Trusted CI site as well.
Okay, I'll probably go through the formal business as we ramp up to getting active. And I may drop you an email also. But again, how much time will be spent during the boot camp on this?
So just since we've only had one boot camp, it was like a couple hours devoted to cybersecurity. But there was indeed overlap with Suresh's and Marlon's presentations on more software engineering and, you know, open source software. So we did have some overlap. But yeah, it was a core 2 hours devoted to the cybersecurity module.
Okay.
And I'll just make a plug perhaps for the next boot camp. So, you know, I guess I see these boot camps as an evolving animal. And quite honestly, for the first boot camp, my module was pretty much speak to the attendees. And we had sort of one minimal hands-on session where I asked them to, you know, do an evaluation of what they considered their risks to be, and sort of prioritize those. But my hope, and what I've been planning, working away at, is to have a more active learning aspect of the cybersecurity module, where we will stand up a mock gateway, if you will, and let attendees, you know, talk to it via an API and demonstrate some of the security pitfalls that might come about. We'll see how that goes.
Okay, thanks, Randy.
Sure.
Michael?
Yes?
This is Sudhakar. I was wondering whether you would cover how to build communities and how to engage with them, because, you know, the gateways inherently are community infrastructures.
Yes.
I don't know, maybe I missed in the beginning. I joined a little late, but do you cover such a thing? I mean, because the communities sometimes is, you know, in a flux, because, you know, graduate students come, they leave, you know.
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah, so Nighty talks about that toward the end of the session. And again, she'll provide some instructions and a catalog of free tools you can use to try to help get your word out and establish sort of a regular contact. I can't stress enough, though, that building a community is not a small effort, right? And many of us got into doing this kind of work for the technical excitement of it, and we're really not necessarily all salesmen or community builders. But it really takes a whole lot of work to do this. And I know that's one of the things that we're looking at as a possible service offering. We're not doing that yet, but it's certainly a thing of importance. Nighty will give you an introduction to it. But I would say many of these topics that we cover end up being sort of like a mini MBA sort of view of how to go about doing one of these projects. And each one you could dive into detail for 1, 2, or 3 weeks if you really wanted to go into that level of detail. But this should be enough for you to at least get started and understand and maybe even formulate some plans to go further. And you know, everything that we do here is helping to help you get that from the standpoint of how do you describe what you're doing? What is the value proposition? Who is your true audience? Who might you want your audience to be that isn't necessarily your audience today? And a lot of this can help you think about, well, how would I have to go about reaching those people?
Thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll invite you to contact directly. You should be able to find links on the sciencegateways.org website to do that. I realize now I forgot to put my email in specific on this presentation, but we can get in contact one way or another through that website. So if you have questions, feel free to send them along. If you want to have a short telephone call or a Skype or whatever, happy to do that as well. So if there's nothing else, I'll give everybody 5 seconds to raise their hand. Thank you, Nighty. Nighty just posted the email in the chat session here on Zoom. So 5 or 10 seconds here for the last word. Otherwise, we'll hang up, and I guess we were on time.
Thanks.
Okay,
Bye.
good. All right, well, thank you all, and hopefully maybe we'll see a few of you in October.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye.
Bye-bye.